Hey everyone, welcome to episode 8 of Revenue Talent Talks. I'm your host, Chris Gannon, founder of Captivate Talent. And today I am here with Amaan Nathoo, VP of Customer Success at Later.com. Right, Later.com or just Later?
Later.com, but either one works. We're happy that we have the .com, so either one is good.
Yeah, the .com's big. It's tough to get the .com. We just tried to go get a new .com for a little side project we're doing, and it was like they won't even sell it to us. They weren't even interested. It's like
Yeah,
really
we got
huge.
lucky. It was before my time at Later. We used to be Latergram. That was the original brand name, and then we rebranded to Later, and part of it was getting that domain. So yeah, we got super lucky.
So, Amaan, I'm really excited about our episode today. First, I think you are our first Canadian guest ever, and are you from Canada? You're in Canada now, right?
Yeah, I'm in Vancouver. I was born here,
Okay.
and then when I was 2 months old, I moved to the Bay Area. So hence the Warriors, the
Yeah, there we
Warriors
go.
fan. So I grew up there for about 20 years, and then I moved back to Vancouver. So I'm still kind of half-half, but Vancouver is home now.
Yeah, and you've done something like pretty interesting in your career. So we get questions all the time. It usually comes from people earlier in their career that how do I pivot from like sales to CS? How do I go from CS to marketing, vice versa? But you've done this pretty recently in your career, which is rare. You've gone from a head of sales to a VP of customer success in a very short amount of time. So I cannot wait to dive into that today. I'm so curious about how you did it, advice you can give to anyone else who might be running through that issue in their head or maybe thinking of overcoming that challenge. But first, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you and who you are and what makes you kind of tick.
Yeah. So other than kind of growing up in the Bay Area and then back to Vancouver, I've been in tech and in SaaS for I guess maybe 8, 9 years now, 7, 8 years. I can't. It's so far. It's been such a great journey and so long that I can't quite remember. I think it's from 2013, 2012. Started off founding my own kind of SaaS company, but failing very quickly in the video space. Trying to be kind of the video introduction onto LinkedIn, which I think LinkedIn actually does now. So maybe we were just a little bit too early. Got into SaaS sales first, and kind of cut my teeth on selling procurement software, which doesn't sound super exciting, but actually was a lot of fun and very exciting. Transitioned through to companies that were in their first couple 100,000 of ARR, moving towards their first couple million of ARR, then went backwards a bit and went to that 0 to 1 phase, and then forward a bit of that 5 to 10 phase, and then most recently at Later that kind of 10 to 50 million ARR phase. But transition, as you said, between sales and customer success, and now a little bit more on the growth side, especially product-led growth. And so it's been an interesting journey of being at various parts of the journey for where companies are at in revenue, but also then having different roles in that. So yeah, I'd love to chat more about that as we go.
Yeah. So first off, like what talk us through your decision to move into CS? Like what was your why? What was your North Star in doing so? What was your driving factor in doing that?
Yeah, so I was at a company here in Vancouver in kind of the late, I guess like maybe 2014, 2015, so mid 2010s. And I was my first sales role. I was super fortunate that the team there was willing to kind of put me into a senior sales role there, and I really enjoyed getting into the process of sales. I've always been on the sales side, but some of it retail. Some of it I'd done door-to-door sales when I was growing up, and I enjoy sales. But what I realized getting into the SaaS side of things is that I really cared more about the customer and the relationship, and I was less motivated by the commission and the grind of kind of making the money for the work. I really enjoyed understanding customers, understanding problems, solving problems for them, and then seeing them kind of reap the benefits of the product. One of the things I realized when I was in that particular role was the sales that I lost, or the deals that I lost, I didn't actually care too much about losing it from the perspective of, yeah, that was a deal I lost, so I'm not going to hit my quota. I cared more
Yep.
about the fact that the product actually could solve a huge problem for them, and then them not using it actually is going to hurt their business. And that was what was kind of the driving factor of wanting them to close the deal, because I knew the product was needed by them so much. And I realized that I just had more of an inclination to understand what problem solving is versus selling. And so the transition to customer success turned more into what do products do for our customers, and how do we build that relationship and make sure that they get the most value? And ended up just feeling that customer success was a stronger fit for me in that mission.
So, it sounds like your drive and your mission and all the right reasons were there, but like, what were some of the action steps you had to take? Because look, I'm going to be honest. If I saw your resume 3 or 4 years ago and you applied to a VP of customer success role, I'd look at it and say zero CS experience, like not a fit,
Yeah.
and it would get moved very quickly to that rejected pile. So, how did you overcome that obstacle, and what were the action steps that you took to get to that point?
Yeah, I got actually really lucky. So after that kind of stint in SaaS sales at Procurify, I actually moved to the UK. So I moved to London for 2 years, and I joined a company that was very early on, maybe had about a handful of customers, called com.Our, which is still kind of kicking and thriving in between London, and they have a team in Australia. And I joined as their head of sales, and it was a product that was kind of lower ARPU, very self-service. And as we went through the process of kind of understanding what customers wanted during the buying journey, the head of sales kind of ended up becoming more of a head of customer success role, because we had this very self-service product. We were trying everything we could to book demos, to get people talking to us before they bought, but the buyer journey ended up becoming more focused on self-service and wanting to get value on their own, and then speaking to someone as part of the journey of getting things on board and set up. So I kind of naturally ended up, though being in a sales role, focusing more on the post-sales journey. And I just enjoyed that more. So I almost got super lucky that though I was hired in a sales role, the role itself turned into more of a customer success role, and I went deep into the customer success side. And then I leveraged that experience to then move on to more customer success focused roles.
So in terms of like more of the like gritty things that you were doing, the action steps of leveraging that experience, like were you collecting like bullet points for your resume? Were you building your network and meeting with other people who knew that was the job that you were doing to help you get your next job? Like what were the steps you took to actually get that VP in the customer success based role?
Yeah, so this was also an interesting time in the UK specifically. So Gainsight had just launched their first UK office so their first office in the UK, and they had Dan Steinman, who was one of the early, I think, GMs or presidents over at Gainsight, who had moved to the UK. I think he had actually come back from out of retirement to come help open up the operations there. And so they were building a community around customer success in London at the time. And I happened to just be there at the time where this was happening. And so I got the chance to network with some of those folks and actually start, like you mentioned, networking, building that list of contacts up who understand the space, learning from them, attending a bunch of meetups, and Gainsight being in the inventor of this space, or the kind of the building a lot of this knowledge around customer success.
Yep.
I just happened to be there at the right place at the right time, but then was able to leverage those relationships in a way that helped fill the gaps that I had from my knowledge, but also fill the gaps that I needed from a networking perspective.
Really cool. So your job at Later, did you get that via networking? Was it cold outreach? Did you send a resume in and close your eyes and say a little prayer, or how did you get that job?
So I think this is the one thing that I've found has worked well for me, and maybe a bit of luck, but also just the way that I've approached some of the jobs, every major job I've had. So whether in sales or customer success, I end up I've never gotten a role by simply just applying and submitting my resume in. I mean, I have when in my junior in my career, but as I've gotten more senior, the only way to stand out the only way I've been able to stand out has been by doing something a little bit different. So with Procurify, it was, I was a founder. I had met the founders. I had a relationship with them, so they gave me a bit of a chance. Moving to London, it was literally identifying who in the company might be the person that I would work with the most, and then literally pitching myself. And so I go through phases of guessing people's email addresses, sending, doing the testing if the email address works, and then crafting a story as to why that role exists, and then what my skill set is that would be able to match it. And so the job in London, my first job in London was basically that, was reaching out to the CEO and saying, hey, I see you're on this journey. I've just helped the company go from A to B, and I think you're about to go through that. here's some of the things that I think would be applicable, and then offering value for free, whether or not the role is for me or not. But hey, I'd love to share with you what challenges we went through that phase, and I'd love to talk to you about the role. But at the worst case, I'd love to share with you what we went through at that time, and that might help you pass some of the challenges that we had. And that is kind of what's been the ticket for me to say, oh, this person, had they just applied, like you said, and looked at the resume, they probably wouldn't have recognized any of those skills exist. But if you're able to craft that story and align it to where they are in their journey, that's what's helped me kind of surpass that hump of getting past the that discovery phase of who I am.
Yeah. What about so you mentioned you've never really applied like to a role later in your career. What made you get away from that? What made you realize that was it just, hey, so many rejections, zero responses? Like, we see a lot of people go down that path and get really frustrated. So like, what was your aha moment?
Yeah, the aha moment was I'm trying to think when I realized that process works. I think early in my career, when you don't have a lot of experience or value to offer, especially if you're entering a new space, came into SaaS with that. I went almost trying to do a founder role before I even got into the SaaS side of things. So some of that didn't translate over. I think my aha moment was I was on a trip with some friends in San Francisco. I was down in San Francisco with some friends from here in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And throughout the weekend, we were taking cabs or Ubers everywhere. Every time, I didn't realize I was doing this, but at the end of the weekend, my friends were like, "How did you do that? How did you get to know every Uber driver so quickly in that short little drive?" Every time we sat in the car, you would get to know the driver really well, and you would find some reason to have a conversation with them. And I realized that for me, how I kind of operate and what worked well for me was I try to find one thing or two things that might relate to someone and then build on that. So I would sit in with a cab driver or an Uber driver and spark up a conversation, and they would say that a place they visited or a place that they're from or how long they'd been in that city for. And I would turn that into what would be a bit of a longer conversation and build a relationship and get to know the person better. And then, and I hadn't actually realized I was doing this until two of my friends had mentioned it to me. And I realized that that's kind of what was my thing. And so when I apply for roles, I try to do the same thing is what is one or two things that are like a little bit of a sliver of having in common, and then just building upon that. And that kind of was the moment where I was like, okay, that's how it works for me. That's how I build relationships in sales. That's how I was building relationships in your roles.
Very cool. Very cool. I want to switch gears a little bit because sometimes we have, people that are getting into management, listening, and we've heard one of the things that you're passionate about is managing up. Can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that and like why you're passionate about managing up and what that means?
Yeah, I think, and this is probably even more so for startups. I think managing up for me is, and I see people do this well with myself and now with my team, is when you're in this kind of early stage company environment, a lot of different, regardless of the layer of leadership, everyone's always learning and growing. And when you become a domain expert in something, so you sometimes end up having to share that knowledge in a way with others in the organization that may not have that level of focus because they have so many other things to focus on. So managing up, for me, what I learned over the years was how to influence others in the organization, especially leadership, in a way that helps you accomplish what you think the company needs, in a way that doesn't necessarily come off in as you may know more than someone else, or that you are more of an expert in something. So what I learned early on in my career was I was working on certain strategy and tactics, especially from a sales perspective, which markets to go after, which segments to go after, which personas, trying to change the course of where we might be going as a business. But I was doing it in a bit of a way that was showing the frustration if I wasn't being heard. So if we were going after a certain segment of the market that I think wasn't a good fit and I wanted to go after somewhere else, and I was trying to drive that influence from the top down, and that wasn't being met, I would react with it with getting a bit more frustrated. You could see it on my face. I'm not very good at holding emotion in. So if I'm unhappy, you would see it. And I realized early in the career that wasn't the way to actually drive influence. And so as I've grown, I've realized that in order for you to drive change and often change from the top down, you kind of have to uh, find some sort of common ground or understand what makes other people tick, and how do you get people to understand your viewpoint and how you see something in a way that's tied to how they might see it. And so I think managing up is a lot of understanding what you might be kind of an expert in, and how do you influence others to see things your way in a way that also keeps you open to see things their way. It's very important as you move into more senior roles that you influence leaders more and more, and there's a really fine line between influencing in the way that they want to be influenced versus the way that you think they may want to be influenced.
Yeah, no, that's really good advice for anyone out there. That's whether you're a seasoned leader or first time leader or want to become a leader. What about like what are some of the mistakes that you've made as a leader that have helped you become a better leader?
Yeah, I would say that one I mentioned earlier was probably my biggest learning of wanting to move into more senior roles, but not knowing how to manage expectations and frustration, because some things oftentimes don't move the way you want them to move or the speed that you want them to move. And the moment where I saw my career change from being, that hump that I had to get over to become a people leader, or especially running teams that are larger, was how do you control your reactions to things in a way that keeps yourself, calm and collected. I think there's a lot of literature out there about stoicism and how
Yeah.
you can only control your reaction to things versus the actual the thing itself. And early on in my career, I was getting too hung up on trying to control the outcomes versus trying to control my own reaction to the outcomes. The moment where I realized that in order to be a people leader, you have to maintain a level of composure, and you have to maintain a level of of calmness that other people can sense and feel calm as well. The easier it will be to influence, and the easier it will be to build a larger and larger team. I think when I was getting frustrated early in my career, like I said, I would let it show. I would react
Yeah.
very emotionally and very quickly. And as soon as I kind of started to hone in on that, that really changed the ability to grow as a professional and as a personal, even in my personal life, but especially as a team, as I've grown a team.
Yeah, that's so important. And I made similar mistakes early on in my leadership career, so I can really relate to that. It's like if the pilot looks nervous, like the plane might be going down, and you can't like the pilot can never look nervous. Like it's
Yeah,
kind
and
of
and
yeah,
and also just that um, there's going to be times where there's turbulence, and even the pilot knows there's turbulence, but you have to be able to, even if you're not the people leader in that moment, you still have to show that level of calmness so that when it's your time to get
yes.
called up, they know that you can handle that situation.
Yeah, that's great. So well said. Awesome. Well, actually, so as a people leader, like this podcast is loosely sponsored by a recruiting company, so we always like to talk about like hiring and like what you
Yeah,
look for
absolutely.
in a hire. But you grew your company to 20 pretty quickly, right? Is it
Yeah,
20
so the
or
team right
your
now,
not your company, your team? Yeah.
yeah, the team right now. So my team at Later now is just over 20 people. We started with three of us, and
Yeah.
that was back at the beginning of the pandemic. So we've actually grown with all that since COVID, which has been pretty incredible. There was a time where, and not until last year, this time the team hadn't actually met, which was pretty cool to spend some time in person. But yeah, we went from zero, from 2 to 20 people in the span of a couple of years, and that's probably been my most exciting part of my role is actually building a team that
Yeah.
is high performing, but also really enjoys each other's company. It's been probably the biggest highlight of my last 2 years.
So, with those first, you had two when you started, but those first few hires that you make, I mean, as a leader, those are critical, not only because you're building the team, but those are really you're showing to your leadership team that like you're capable of doing this job. What did you look for in those first few hires?
Yeah, yeah. I think two things really have stood out to me in my career as I've hired and built teams. The first is self-awareness. And so finding people who are really aware of what their skills are, but actually more importantly, where their gap in skills are and where they may be actually falling short, and knowing that really well. And that goes really hand in hand with the next thing, which is coachability. So the two things kind of need to be there. One can't kind of survive without the other. So the first couple hires that we built for the team were some experience in the space. Obviously, like you want someone who's got some experience within customer success, and we were lucky to find some folks that were experienced within customer success, but also in the social media space. So that really worked well. But more importantly, about how they've grown was, are they aware of themselves? Are they humble? And then how quickly can they adapt as the team grows and they get feedback, or how quickly can they share feedback with me, and vice versa. And that coachability piece is for me has been probably the most important factor of building a high performing team, is that we look at each other. We all play a role in a system, and the moment that you might make a mistake, or you might need some feedback in that system of what your role is, can you take that and implement it quickly? It may take a couple times, fine, but are you able to implement it in a quick enough time where the team is confident, again, that your role in the system is going to get met? Those are the two things that have been the most important for me as we built a team.
So, like, having that play into culture, like what's been the key to success for you creating that strong team culture that, up until recently never met, and then you meet in person, and I'm sure you were a little nervous, but it sounds like everything clicked.
Yeah. We were very purposeful about our values in the team. So we have company values, and then we had also, when I first joined later, we built some team values within the success team. So things like team first is the number one. The moment someone feels like as an individual they can go faster than everyone else is the moment where everyone else slows down, and including that person. So some of our values are team first. We're very experimental in customer success, so we need someone who's very kind of curious and thinks of things as an iterative experiment. Yep. There's knowledge sharing, really being able to, as you learn, you have the ability to share that knowledge with other folks. There's a few more, but what we did was we put all these things down on paper, and so when we were hiring, we were thinking about these values, and we would bring them up in the hiring process. Now that the managers on my team do all the hiring, they do the same thing. They think about those same things. They bring those values to light when they're going through the hiring process, so that every single additional person we bring on, we think about through that lens. The analogy I like to give is, I've probably every shopping cart maybe has this problem, but the worst experience is when you're shopping and one of your shopping carts is kind of like the wheel is just kind of like shaking along and you can't move the cart properly. The way that the team works is, if there's one individual in the team that is that person who's kind of like, again, either wanting to do something differently and not that team player, the whole system kind of breaks down. And so the team has been really good at finding talent that fits what our values are, and then hiring further and further with that same mindset.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. You don't want that shopping cart that keeps making wrong turns.
It's a tough analogy because I feel like it's hard to find a shopping cart that doesn't have that problem. But
well, no, I think that analogy is spot on. That so many teams are built like that it's rare that you get one that is cohesive and is working right and is fluid in their interview process and hiring process. But so, like, your managers sit down and you all agree on, hey, these are the values, this is how we're interviewing for them, and like maybe these are the answers that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think we put together a series of assessments in the hiring process that don't necessarily need to have a specific answer, but kind of give you the answer you're looking for. And sometimes people surprise you. The answer that you think you're going to get is different, but still really aligns well with showing that quality. But I think worked well. And actually, one of the previous companies I worked for had done a blog post about this, of like, the idea of like the exponential impact of mishiring. And it was like, your first couple hires, it's sometimes easy to get that first 4 or 5 people to fit really well with the mold. But the moment you hire one person as like, number 6 or number 7 or 8, wherever it is, that doesn't fit that seed grows into another, 2 more people, and then 4 more people, and 8 more people, et cetera, et cetera. So we just did a really good job of getting the team together and saying, this is the kind of person who fits well with us. And then we also make sure that we're all involved with the process so that everyone gets a chance to assess. And so the typical hiring process for us is we put a roll up. We have a great team here at Later that does our initial screening and
Yep.
of helping us identify who strong candidates are before they even met us. They then meet their hiring manager, or whether it's myself or someone on my team. They go through some sort of assessment, with that person, or they go through their background and decide if that person's ready to move on to the kind of project phase. And before the hiring is actually done in post-project phase, that person gets to meet the other leaders in the team, myself, and then they get to meet members of the people that are going to work, the team that they're going to be working with. So there's kind of a system of checks and balances that gets multiple perspectives on there and makes sure that one person might pick up on something that the rest of us didn't, and we talk about that and make sure that we're very holistic in our approach to who that candidate is, if they're going to be a good fit.
Are they actually continuing to interview during the project phase?
Yes. So
okay.
No. So the steps are initial screening, then a call with the hiring manager to kind of walk through their background. The purpose of that is to determine, do you think that person, if they were given the project, would be successful or have a chance of being successful? If they're not, then we don't pass that project on to them. During the project phase, they complete the project. They present that project to a panel of other folks and leaders on the team. And then the last step is they go through a bit of a culture interview with our HR team again. And then they also meet more folks in the team that kind of get a chance to assess them for those values. And so during the project phase, they're just focusing on the project, but it's usually pretty short. And then they get a chance to move through that pretty quickly.
Amazing. Amaan, I actually forgot to ask you a question at the beginning, and I'm so curious because I love asking this question to all our guests. But what was your first job? Like
my first job,
first job where you got some sort of paycheck, like probably pre, college or something like that.
Oh yeah. I've so my well, I'll answer that in 2 ways. My first job was I grew up in a household with my parents that were immigrant parents and had small businesses, and so I was put to work early, but I wasn't getting a paycheck for that work, so it was basically child labor. But no, my parents owned a chain of dry cleaners as a kid, and I used to spend a lot of time hanging out there, and then we transitioned into owning a restaurant. So the restaurant, when I was, I think maybe 16, 17, was when I worked for my parents, and they actually started paying me. And so I worked on the weekends, and that was nice because I didn't have any expenses because I was living at home and I was getting a paycheck. So that was one of my first jobs. The other one that I would say that maybe is the better one that is outside the family was growing up in California. I had a couple friends who worked doing maintenance work at a country club. So that was my first non-family job, and it was a lot of fun because it was with your buddies in high school, and it was just like a fun summer job.
I love the family business jobs, and I'm curious, were you front of the house or back of the house? Did they keep you in the back, like keeping things running, or were you smiling up front?
I was front of the house, order taking. We had a restaurant, like a burger shop, and we had an ice cream shop. I didn't get paid for, but I got paid in ice cream, which was nice. And that was both of them were front of shop. So I guess they had enough confidence in me to put me at the forefront.
So you essentially, I mean, you were very early on in the customer success space. Like you were making people happy, right? Yeah. So.
And it goes back to, you kind of have to do that when you have that whole relationship building piece of being in the Uber. You can't be the person who's scooping ice cream and then not talking to the customers and getting to know them. So I must have had a big impact on kind of relationship building skills that I honed it on early.
Yeah. Well, I know we're starting to run on time, but I had a few more questions to ask you. One is, do you have any advice or learnings that an earlier stage company could take with them, like from the CS side of things? Like, what's something that you've seen companies make mistakes on, or you would give advice that they should do earlier on their journey?
Yeah. I would say from a customer success perspective, one of the things that I think, a couple things. One is customer success teams typically focus a lot on retention, and I think retention is obviously a can be very strong or very detrimental to a SaaS business. Thinking about it, and my team's going to laugh at me if they listen to this because they hear me talk about this all the time, is retention is an output. I can already hear them laughing in the back of my mind. It's an output of all these things that you do. So you have to work on what goes into it. So things like getting people value faster, making sure they're discovering more value, and then identifying the reasons why they're leaving, and really honing in on those and being experimental with how you can approach solving problems in retention. That's the actual customer success function of it. I think from an org design perspective, it's creating a segmented approach to how the team within success operates. So giving people the ability not to necessarily be a one size fits all and try to run that whole process, by identifying the strengths of folks to know who are the best at getting people value early, or are really good at getting people to discover value, after they've already began and activated. So that separation of domain expertise in the team and segmenting the team in a way that fits the customer journey. Early on in Procurify, and some of the times when we were super early, we had people doing the whole way, and as soon as you hit an inflection point where that's tough to do, we started specializing. And so creating specializations from an org structure perspective is a major way to kind of help scale the team faster.
Amazing. And what about in terms of advice that you'd give to anyone who's aspiring to be a VP of customer success or VP of CS? Like what?
Yeah, I think the biggest unlock for me of professional growth, and I've been very lucky that my role has grown relatively quickly, and Leader's done a really great job of giving me that opportunity to grow fast. So I think it all starts at the roots of hiring the right folks that you trust to be able to take things on, manage them the way that you'd want to be managed. If you were owning something, you kind of want to be left to do that and do it the way that you think is best. And then expect that if you're not doing it the best, you're going to get feedback, but you know that you've been trusted to do that. The moment you're able to hire people and trust them and enable them to do their best work, the more free you are to be able to think strategically and high level, which means you can then think about where the business can go, and then you can influence leaders. And the more you influence leaders, the more you're seen as a leader yourself, and the more opportunity you're given to move up in the organization. So it all starts with trusting your team to take things on so that it frees you up to think of the bigger picture.
Amazing. My last two questions are: what is the best, your most favorite, or the worst interview question you've ever heard, been asked, have asked somebody? It could be any one of the three, any combination.
That I would say. So I'll go with best. I can't think of the worst. I think best. We have an internal debate at Later of pineapple on pizza, and so I typically ask candidates as a fun one of, are you pro or anti pineapple on pizza? It doesn't really impact them getting the role, but it's just a fun way to put them on one side and make a fun thing about it. I can't think of a bad question. Yeah,
I actually agree with questions like that sometimes, because I think, if somebody's looking for a specific answer, I think you're crazy. But I do think putting somebody at ease sometimes and opening up the conversation, because interviewing's hard, and if somebody's a professional interviewer, they might not be the best person that you want to hire. So you want to ease somebody into it and loosen them up a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's the exact purpose of that, is to take at the end of a very serious situation and lighten it up a bit. If I think of kind of worst question, I remember I was interviewing I think this also kind of drove me more towards startups, but interviewing at a very corporate for a very corporate sales role, and the district manager was was grilling me in a way that was specific to try to get me a bit off my normal make the boat a bit rocky. And I remember I had my shirt or my tie on, but the button underneath was open, because I was just it was kind of tight. And he made it a point to kind of ask me why that was the case. And I just found it a little bit what were you trying to prove in that situation? There's even if you picked up on it as a leader, you can just note it and keep it in the back of your mind, maybe, not as well polished or whatever it is, but to bring it up and ask that question, it was kind of awkward. and it was an easy one for me to walk out of that meeting and send an email saying, actually, this role is not for me. But so I think like there's things that you can assess on your own, and there's questions you can ask, and as long as the question has a purpose and the answer you're going to get is purposeful to what you're trying to accomplish. If it's not, then don't ask it.
Yeah, I never got people who try to make people fail in an interview. It's like, what are you gaining? You're actually wasting your time, their time, and you're not completing the objective, which was to hire somebody.
Yeah, or learn a bit more whether or not you're going to hire them.
Yeah, it's absolutely well. So my last question is a fun one. Actually, I am curious, what side of pineapple pizza are you on?
I'm pro pineapple.
Pro pineapple.
I'm pro pineapple, and we did we had a big town hall meeting yesterday, and we used an app called Slido, which is kind of in the middle of presentations you can interact and answer questions, and it was one of the questions that was asked. We just merged with another company back in April, so we're getting to know the other business, and so this was one of the questions. And surprisingly, I think it was 65 or 70% of the company said, of 350 people said pro pineapple. So I'm on the right side of this one.
Well, do you actually know where pineapple pizza was invented? Slightly off topic.
I don't, but I feel like I should know since I'm so pro.
It's not Hawaii. It was actually Canadian.
There you go.
So
pineapple and yeah, I feel like it's like Canadian bacon or ham or something like that.
Awesome. And my closing question for you, it's a fun one. What is your go-to, if you're going to have a last meal or your go-to meal, what is it? Is there a place, a purpose? Like what makes you happy? What makes you excited?
We talk about this within our household of like your like last meal, what would it be? And my partner always says that like noodles, spicy, anything spicy noodles, whether it's like Italian or Asian or whatever it is. For me, I'm trying to think of what's something that I can have that I'd never get tired of. I'm trying to eat less red meat, or I've told myself recently that I'm stopping eating red meat, but burgers are like, have always been my weakness. I feel like I can have them a ton. So I'd have to say like a really good, maybe back to my California roots, I'll go with In-N-Out burger.
In-N-Out burger. Oh man.
It's actually not my favorite burger, but I just feel like it fits well with the whole story.
Yeah. It's like a thing. It's a great marketing play. Like they created this crazy culture over like a pretty good burger and like
it's not the best burger, but a good burger would be my burger would be probably my go-to meal. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Amaan, thank you so much for your time today. I know you're super busy, and this was super insightful. Hopefully anyone who's looking to take the journey to a VP of customer success or pivot their career from sales to CS or just pivot in general, you've dropped some great learnings, and we're going to push them out there to our community and hopefully yours too. So thank you so much for being the guest on episode 8 of Revenue Talent Talk. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Chris. It was awesome.
Awesome. Take care. And